Hey Nate, hey Vasily, hey Lily. Sorry about that with the confusion with the link. It looks like we're now logging in, which is great. So we'll see who comes in, and we'll introduce the whole piece, and we will begin to chat. Hi, yoel. Let's give it a couple more. Let's give it a couple more minutes and see who else comes in. Just in the meantime, let me take a look. So hi, Nate, where are you? Where are you currently based?
Connecticut in the U.S. So East Coast.
East Coast. Okay, nice. How is everything there? I think like the East Coast generally is kind of looking a bit better in terms of COVID, right?
Yeah, Connecticut's I think one of, if not the best in the country right now. So in my little state, we're doing well overall.
The right, not looking the best, not looking great.
Where are you located?
So I'm in a city called Kiryat Gat, which is in the south of Israel.
Okay.
Originally from the UK, and then moved to 5 years ago now, nearly 5 years ago. Let's take a quick look. Okay, cool. Hey, Vasily, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. It's great to see you.
Long time no talk.
This is true.
Yeah.
And yoel, are you with us?
Your mic is out. You have to.
There we go.
Hey guys.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. So just by way of introduction, my name is not Masa Community. Let me just change that very quickly. My name is Rabbi Adam Drucker. I'm originally from the UK, from London, moved to Israel with my family about 5 years ago. I now live in a city called Kiryat Gat, which is in the south of Israel. And I work as a rabbi here in Israel, primarily for young Judea. And I also kind of pop into the Wujis program every now and again. And I was asked by Tamar of Masa to kind of host these like once a month get together meetings, a chance for us to kind of talk, discuss issues that relate to different aspects of Jewish belief, Jewish practice, Jewish society, and also just general things going on in the world, and any general kind of philosophical and ethical issues we want to sink our teeth into. So before we begin, I'll just explain to you kind of how I want to kind of create the space. It's very like laid back. It's a chance for you to kind of enter into a open, non-judgmental forum for us to kind of discuss issues and voice our opinions, and to be able to kind of get to a deeper understanding on whatever topic we kind of decide to focus on, either during each session and every single month. So let's just take a look. So hi, Carolyn, you just joined us. Hello, can you hear us? Did I say your name correctly, Carolyn? Caroline? Okay, we'll see. So Nate, thank you. Nate, I know you introduced yourself to me. Just one more time for yoel and Vasily, introduce yourself.
I'm first. Sorry, what did I miss?
Yeah, go. Just introduce yourself. Where you zooming in from?
Yeah, I'm from Tel Aviv now, in my apartment in Tel Aviv with my roommate. I was Masa Madrich in the past. That's all.
Which program were you a Madrich for?
Top Israel internship. I did it a few times. With the program, the organizer Sechlav.
Cool.
So that's all, basically.
Very nice, very nice. And Nate, where you're coming in from Connecticut, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm in the States right now. I was in Israel on MITF Masa last year, teaching English in Ramle, and came back in July, I think, and here I am.
Beautiful. And Vasily, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been to Israel 2 years ago with Young Judea for like 5 months, and now I'm back in Germany doing my master's degree in design.
Fantastic, wonderful. And let's try one more time. Caroline, can you hear us? I'll take that as a no, but maybe you'll pop in sooner or later. Okay. So the idea. Oh, hello. Yes, they're great. Okay, great. Hi from Netherlands. Wonderful. Again, that's great that you sent that message. There's no pressure at all, either to. If you want to have your camera on, that's fine. If you prefer not to have a camera on, that's also fine with me. And again, feel free to use the chat box either to send in questions, responses, comments, concerns as we kind of chat and discuss with different issues with each other. Or again, if you want to use the microphone and video and webcam as much as you would like, that's also great. That's also wonderful. Okay, so every month, Tamar and I thought it'd be like a nice idea for people who are around, available, interested to kind of come together and discuss different issues that are either popping up at the moment in the world today, or things that have been popping up in the Jewish world for close to 3,000 years. So we have a lot of things to choose from. So there's every session I'll like just throw out like a 5-minute just idea to do with whatever the time of year is. And either we can use that as like a springboard to continue on a conversation, or if there's something particular that you want to ask, challenge, talk about, then I'm very, very happy to go in that direction too. So just very, very briefly for the quick introduction, we're now in the Jewish calendar, we've entered the Hebrew month of Tammuz, which, and in a couple of days, on the 17th of Tammuz, we begin the first fast day and the first day of a time period known as the 3 weeks, or in Hebrew, Bein HaMetzarim, which traditionally / historically has been a time of mourning and sorrow for the Jewish people. That both in terms of the biblical narrative and also different moments within Jewish history post-Bible, different events have performed the Jewish people that have either led to them being dispersed around the world, or even ending up in the loss of Jewish life. So for example, on the 17th of Tammuz, the events in the Bible, such as Moses coming and seeing the golden calf, the Jewish people worshiping the golden calf, and then destroying the 2 tablets of stone, after which a number of Jews, or Israelites, I should say, perished and died then and there. And from then on, various different events took place that befell the Jewish people. And so during those 3 weeks that begin this week, I believe it's on Thursday, the fast day, until Tish B'Av, the 9th of Av, we also remember the destruction of both temples in Jerusalem. We also commemorate and we mourn the expulsion of Jews from France and from Spain. We also commemorate the massacre that took place to the Jews in York, in Great Britain, in England, as well as the testimony of the spies that came back from Israel. And the question is, why is it, right, the Jewish calendar itself is so obsessed with kind of laying out moments for focused emotion, that if we were to think about, how we like to lead our lives, we don't necessarily set aside times when we are conscious of being happy, conscious of being sad, conscious of being relaxed. We kind of very much like to live in the moment and see where life takes us. Yet, counterintuitively, Jewish tradition seems to kind of play this opposite game, where, for example, now, during these 3 weeks, traditionally we're told, you now have to be sad during these 3 weeks. And for that reason, there is a tradition that Jewish people don't listen to music, and they don't go swimming, and they don't get haircuts, and they don't shave, and they don't have weddings, they don't have bar and bat mitzvahs. Pretty similar to, I would say, maybe like a COVID-19 lockdown. And the question is, what's the purpose? What's the function of kind of squeezing and suggesting this is a time when you should feel such and such an emotion? And one answer that I heard, which was really, really wonderful, is that particularly at a time, right, when our activity has been limited, that we've had to kind of rethink how we use our brain and how we use our time. I read an article that being in quarantine or just generally being in lockdown is sometimes more exhausting than just generally living one's life and being able to go out and about, because of the brain's, our brain has been thrown into this whole new environment where it's had to come up with new habits and new routines. And because it's no longer kind of running smoothly along this habitual train track that maybe we were used to living for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, that in itself is exhausting. The brain trying to find and create a space to connect and feel emotions and process and digest what's going on around it in a whole new way. And so this idea of the Bein HaMitzarim, the 3 weeks, is a way to kind of focus one's mind, focus one's energy, and focus one's emotions in order to begin to process what it means to be an individual as part of a larger community. Right? So when this community, the Jewish community, at this point in the year needs to reflect and mourn and think about its place within the world, right? How it relates to Jews amongst themselves, an issue that's very much discussed during the 3 weeks of what led to the destructions of baseless hatred, or whether it's, right, whether it's how we relate to others, how Jewish identity, Jewish community is supposed to be a bastion for equality, or is it something where us Jews are ones who have unfortunately known suffering and known indignities so much that we should be that shining light, we should be the light among the nations to show what it means to overcome that. Having that focused time, particularly during this year of focus, this is the emotion that you should be focusing on, in a way is comforting. In a way, it kind of gives us a structure that maybe could be lacking and could be missing. So that was just like the one thing I wanted to kind of briefly touch upon. I'm now going to kind of open it up to all of you. Just for those of you who joined just now, welcome Hal, welcome Konstantin, it's lovely to see you all. I'm very happy now to kind of take any questions, topics, ideas that any of you would like to kind of explore, discuss, and we'll go from there. So either you can, if you want to shout out, speak, or type any questions in the chat box. I'm happy to take suggestions from either. Yeah, I'm here for you to facilitate this. I'm just going to sip of my coffee whilst I wait.
Well, it made me think of when I was in Israel. I spent every Shabbat with this one family and this one guy, and he decided to take upon himself and be like a father figure type, and me growing up, I didn't grow up with very much Jewish community or any kind of formal structure to it. And one of the things that he kept saying again and again and again over the course of the whole year was mitzvah gadola liot b'simcha. So on the other hand, besides the taking that focused time to like think about your place in the world, it's also, if 49 weeks out of the year it's a mitzvah and a big mitzvah to be happy, sometimes you need to take a breather and realize, like not just realize, but kind of like allow yourself to not be happy.
I love it. Yeah, fantastic. Look, another question is, right, or like a way of looking at it is, so mitzvah gedola liyot b'simcha, it's a huge mitzvah, it's a huge good deed, command even to be happy. And like the nature of happiness within Judaism is also like is an interesting one. So for example, so like if we take this time period of like the 3 weeks, which is a sad reflective time, you could argue the opposite is the festival of Sukkot. And the festival of Sukkot and Simchat Torah, which is kind of embedded within the name Simchat Torah, the happiness of the Torah, is also known as Zman Simchatenu, the time of our happiness. Now that comes with it socializing and eating great food and drinking great drinks, dancing and singing. Now, each Jewish festival has a biblical text that's like associated with it we generally read. Now, what's fascinating is the biblical text that we read during Sukkot, also known as Zman Simchatenu, is the biblical book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. Now, the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, when one reads that book, when you first read it, your initial impression is it's the opposite of happiness. The first line of that book is Kohelet ben David, Havel Havalim Hakol Havel, which translated into English is almost like a nihilistic mantra of pointless, everything is pointless. Then the book goes on for another 12 chapters of just essentially ripping or like delving deeper into this idea of how nothing means anything. Another line that comes up in the book, that there is nothing new under the sun. That anything you could ever try and think that you might be doing which is good and contributing to the world, before you get ahead of yourself and think, oh, I'm going to be the next whatever, remember, there's probably 1,000 people who have had that same thought who have failed, or people who have lived before you who have probably achieved the same thing. Written traditionally or ascribed to King Solomon, and towards the end of his life, of someone who went out and tried to kind of find happiness in wine, and tried to find happiness in food, and tried to find happiness, even as described in the book, in like sexual pursuits. And King Solomon finds no real happiness in anything. And as the book progresses, he asks the question, what is real happiness? Right, on the one hand, it is this delving into and getting as much satisfaction from the world that we have. Another kind of sweet happiness or true happiness is a realization of truth. That moment that clicks in our mind of, oh, like I get it. I get what my purpose is. I get what my life should be. So I think that's that. I think as well, Nate, with you talking about like mitzvah gedolah liyot b'simcha. Simcha writes, happiness on the one hand is being joyful, is enjoying other people's company and being a outgoing, happy, energetic person that gets the most from any experience in one's life. But simcha in at least in Jewish philosophy has that extra step of finding one's purpose, understanding or trying to wrestle with what it means that everything is pointless, but still being able to continue on, to try and find and push to contribute positively to society and to the world. But you're right, there's that wonderful balance there. Sorry, I went on for quite a bit there. Okay, wonderful. Anyway, okay, question, point, comment, concern.
I have a question. I don't know if
Yes.
you know off the top of your head, but do you know what's the root? Like, what is the root meaning of simcha? Like, the shoresh for like, what is it derived from? Is it just straight up happiness, or is it like shalom comes from like whole or complete, or like, you know, is there some kind of etymological there like?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so the root word here is sameach, which is shin mem chet. But in Jewish literature, there are different words which we use for you could keep like happiness. There's sason, rina, simcha, gila, chedva. There's like a bunch of different words, right? So as you say, each one has its own has its own like underpinning root. So sameach, simcha, is a happiness that's rooted in contentment. So rather than it being like, let's say like another, so sason, which is another word for happiness, is closer linked to like this just outward joy. One, like when something external, you feel something like external is happening, that then kind of comes into you and you feel this just ecstasy. That's more of a sason. Now we get confused, we kind of conflate the two. Sameach kind of links with this the concept of contentment, but beyond contentment, of satisfaction in one's own efforts. That the happiness is something which comes from within, rather than it being kind of coming from the outside.
So
plenty of
sason would be
examples.
something.
Yeah, so go on, Nate.
So sason would be something more like ephemeral, transient, fleeting, kind of like, I'm enjoying this moment. We're having a party. It's a great moment, but it's not like, if we're talking about the mitzvah gedolah, it's to be like feeling like like you're good with yourself.
Right, and again, look, the physical manifestation of both. Let's say you take sason and simcha, view those because they're quite good. Because they're good to compare. The actual manifestation of what does that then look like could be the similar or exactly the same. The differences in terms of those two words is the root or the source of happiness. And it's it's also interesting that why it's mitzvah gedolah liyot b'simcha rather than any other kind of joy or happiness, because a sense of, let's say we'll use the word simcha, is going to be longer lasting or more easily sustainable. That a happiness that comes from a satisfaction with one's own position in life, one's own achievements, rather than something that comes from something which is external. The issue with happiness comes from an external is, as soon as that external stimuli is gone, then the happiness is gone, right? Once that the high is now over, whereas simcha is built, is layered upon years and years of self-work and trying to kind of make yourself a better person. And then the realization of where you've now come, what you have achieved in that time, that feeling of simcha, that feeling of happiness is what we're talking about here. Does that answer your question, Yoel? I think so. Okay, wonderful. Excellent. Any another question related to simcha or happiness, contentment, or anything related or unrelated?
Okay, so I have a question.
Yes.
So it's not about simcha. It's like a totally different question, different
Wonderful.
topic. Like today we can see there is a lot of let's say different versions of Judaism today in the new world, like Orthodox, Reform, and etc. etc. And like today when you practice Judaism, you can see so many things that sometimes it depends in which stream you belong to or looking at, but many times the modern values are contradicting was like the Judaism or the old Judaism or and it's a big struggle. So many times you can face with like topics in Judaism that doesn't go with the modern values, or in other words, your values. Yeah, I would like to hear like what do you think about it, how you deal with it. Maybe there's no way to deal with it, and how you can take like the things that were relevant so many years ago and things were changed. So should we change everything? I know it's a really big topic and issue, but yeah, I think it's a really interesting and something that we all deal with today.
Thank you, Yoel. Okay, brilliant question. Okay, wonderful. So let me break it down a bit and I'll give some background, and then again, please feel free as I'm speaking to interrupt me or throw in like any like questions if you want me to kind of focus on a particular piece. So, and again, I'll throw out some examples, and maybe like it could be there's something you were thinking of or whatever. So let's start from the beginning. Let's say historically, up until the 17th century or so, there was only really one stream of Judaism, right? You were Jewish, and that was basically it. And what it meant to be your level of observance was just kind of how much time you were able to commit to studying the Torah, or how stringent you were with particular laws. There wasn't necessarily this kind of ideological difference that kind of came into play up until the Enlightenment that begins in the 1700s, in which individuals globally begin to celebrate, rightfully so, a sense of liberty, of delving into the human condition, the advancement of the sciences, right, leading to the Industrial Revolution, etc., etc. And then at that point, the Judaism also has its own kind of wake-up moment with a movement called Haskalah, like it's the Jewish Enlightenment, in which there is this like crossroads where, as Yoel pointed out beautifully, that there was the initial kind of issue was, well, I as a Jew living in this starts in Germany, want to be a part of this modern society, but also still value some of my Judaism. So how much should I practice my Judaism outside in the world, and how much should be a private piece? How much is Hebrew still a relevant language versus how much should I pray in a language I actually understand? And then those issues of language, of Shabbat observance, of keeping kosher, then developed as the liberal movement then kind of took hold and pushed further and further and further in the 1900s, the 20th century and the 21st century, where again, I'll get into my kind of own personal beliefs soon, but how issues that the traditional Judaism, such as homosexuality or same-sex marriage, issues that relate to equality of the sexes, of men and women. Again, that was already also, as we said, that was already an issue in the 1900s. Then came at loggerheads, which then led off to the split of various different denominations in terms of how much do we stick to traditional values and the strict reading of biblical texts, but not only biblical texts, Talmudic texts, the oral interpretation of the Bible, and how much should we adapt and change our Jewish values and Jewish traditions in order to match up, as you said beautifully, Yoel, with not only our own kind of personal values, but like these global set of liberal values that are part of the Western world today.
Yeah, and can I just ask like another
absolutely.
thing?
Yeah.
Just like it doesn't have to be like this. Like of course this like the thing that you mentioned about like genders, equality, and etc. All the things that you mentioned, but also it doesn't have to be, if I can say, like this spicy issue. It can be also just a minhag, a custom that they did like so many years ago because some reasons, but today it's not relevant for, so it doesn't have like those things are definitely like topics with like gays and etc. It's very like
So like, okay,
yeah, you got
okay.
it.
So, like, so a good example. So here's like a good example, which is less. I mean, depends who you're speaking to, but less spicy is like the kitniot on Pesach, for example. It's like a great example of that, right? Where the Ashkenazi Jewish world, the rabbis at the time developed this like custom that meant that Ashkenazi Jews would not be allowed to eat certain grains on Passover, on Pesach, either because they were too similar to like forbidden grains such as wheat and oats and whatever, and also because of the way that they were manufactured and shipped and harvested in Europe at that time, meant they could become mixed in with like grains that would be considered chametz. And the Sephardi world didn't have this stringency because the rabbis at the time decided it wasn't necessarily an issue. And the question is that nowadays kitniot is, for some people, it's like a huge deal. But I don't eat rice, and I don't eat hummus on Pesach, when in fact it's like a kind of, the logic behind it is completely irrelevant. Another example would be, this is an interesting one, that in the Talmud, Talmud it states that a Jewish person shouldn't eat meat and fish together on the same plate because, as the Talmudic rabbis say, it will cause a skin condition. It will cause a disease of like some kind of dermatological condition, right? Now that again is like the most, you could argue, let's say 2,000 years ago, maybe that was like the most advanced the medical profession, the medical world was at that time. But today we know that's completely and utterly bogus, right? So the question is, again, how much then should we change this Jewish tradition? And again, Orthodox Jews still keep this tradition, even though we know the reason why it was said is no longer relevant at all, right? Is that also like what you were getting at, yoel, as well, like those types of issues? Okay, so let's take a look. So there's a few different branches. So I'll take a look first at okay, let's take a look at like that issue, those issue first. Okay, so assumptions made by the rabbis 2,000 years ago, which we now know to be like non-beneficial and irrelevant, right? And there is a case to be made, in my opinion, for the relevancy of a number of Jewish traditions, which some people keep and some people don't. Okay, for example, Shabbat. Okay, I would argue that Shabbat itself, as a time in which we disconnect at least once a week in order to focus on spiritual / emotional / social pursuits, which maybe we can become distracted from during the week. Beyond like the actual in-depth laws of Shabbat, there seems to be still value with that in the 21st century. I think one could say the same thing about you could say the same thing about prayer. You could say the same thing about meditation. You could say the same thing about even saying blessings. I think that an individual who wants to make a stronger connection with their Jewish identity, there is definite value in looking at those types of traditions, and with either like friends or with an individual who they trust, who maybe has like a better background in like Jewish learning or Jewish knowledge, have an honest and open debate about whether or not those issues that we've mentioned so far are still relevant and still bring meaning and purpose into one's life. And if they don't bring meaning into one's life and don't bring purpose into one's life and don't connect one to insert whatever you want to connect to, whether it's Jewish community, Jewish tradition, Jewish culture, Jewish spirituality, Jewish belief in God, whatever it is, if you're struggling in that area and it's devaluing in some way your own identity and how you see yourself, then there is what to say to kind of perhaps change the way that you interpret and see tradition. Okay, that particularly becomes true with things like, in my opinion, Kitzniot. We mentioned the whole thing of Passover and the evidence that exists. This is no longer an issue. I think makes sense. Like if look, we don't have to talk about the spicy topics if you don't want to. We can focus on it on another. We like a different time. We can talk about that. I think that the reason why you're seeing more and more divisions within the Jewish community and also the Orthodox community is because of the question that you asked. I think that more and more people who value Jewish tradition or Jewish culture are becoming frustrated and tired. They don't have the agency in terms of Jewish tradition and Jewish practice like they do in all other areas of their lives. So you look at history. If I had no power in the country that I lived, right, I wasn't in control of who was ruling my country, right? I didn't have any really power who was ruling my town or my province. So my religion fits into that same pattern. Now, when the majority of us live in liberal democracies, or on a varying scale of whatever that means, there is this one piece, this aspect of our life that kind of doesn't necessarily catch up and keep up in the same way, which is our religion or our faith or our spiritual group or our cultural group. If I'm able to choose, in theory, who our leaders are, I'm able to choose what job I do. I'm able to choose who I'm friends with and how I project myself. Why doesn't my faith have that same malleability? I think that's a legitimate question. And I think that's a reason why we're entering into a post-denominational age where people aren't necessarily happy to kind of say, to label themselves as just Reform or Conservative or Orthodox or Modern Orthodox or Open Orthodox or Haredi or Hasidish or Liberal or Reconstructionist or whatever. Individuals want to have that same type of agency and that same type of liberalism also with their religion, and to be able to create a individualistic Jewish space that benefits their lives and gives them meaning. That's like a very general answer. And look, if we want to go into like more details of like particular issues either I've mentioned or haven't mentioned, I'm very happy to do that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it gave a good background about how did it happen.
Right. Thank you. But obviously, like I think each issue has like its own answer or has its own path, right, of how to approach it. I think like on a base level, in my opinion, individuals should feel like they have agency to find meaning in the practices that they are doing, like in every aspect of our lives, right? There's so many things that we do that are kind of just handed down to us by societal expectations, the way that we talk, the way that we dress, the way that we speak, right? And there's value and there's benefit trying to understand why I do those things and what benefit they bring to my life, and to kind of attach onto that also my Jewish practice and my Jewish beliefs. That's like a base level. So, okay, Vasily, there's a question over here. There's also the issue that Ethiopian Jews and some communities are not seen as real Jews. Okay, excellent question.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to...
Sure. So basically, in Germany, I'm in a group of Jewish people, and like one of the guys that I know there, he's like organizing a lot of meetings and such, but he has like a very strictly, I would call it almost a reactionary view of Judaism, that basically Judaism has been made the way it has been 2,000 years ago or however long ago, and that's it. If you step outside of that, those possibilities, that's it, and you are no longer basically abiding the text as they were written back then. But my problem is that I feel like first of all, I know far too little to actually like have a real talk about this, to argue one way or another. But secondly, still the things that I feel like I know heavily imply that he's wrong. Because there's this issue about like in the Torah, there are like chapters where we are allowed basically to have slaves. That slavery is allowed practice, but somehow we, the Jewish people, over the years decided that having slaves, it is actually not such a great idea. And it became a part of Judaism to, well, not have slaves. The same goes with stoning non-virgins before they get married, things like that. So I feel like Judaism isn't really that put in stone as much as certain people pretend to, but I feel like I don't know enough to really argue that way.
Okay, it's a brilliant point. The examples you gave are excellent. You could go on and on and on of so many examples that because of cultural reasons, we no longer practice certain things within Judaism. Another really good example is polygamy. Okay, brilliant example. Okay, in the 11th century, there was a series of Jewish practices that were kind of officially outlawed. They were called the Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom. The Rav called Rabbeinu Gershom took a list of about a few dozen different activities and said that even though these practices are something which are mentioned in the Bible, discussed in the Talmud, because they are deemed to be societally immoral, they're no longer part of practice of Judaism. The slavery piece came before that. Even like the whole issue of stoning an individual who broke Shabbat, for example. But the issue, for example, of polygamy is another another good one. Now, in my opinion, the foundation the reason why this is because individuals confuse culture versus dogma. And it's convenient, when it's convenient for the Jewish community as a whole to move to the side or to say that a certain practice is no longer deemed to be acceptable, that's really, it's culture taking its course within Judaism to then make a positive change within the community. And for whatever reason, if you look at the example of, let's say, women's roles in Judaism, or you look at examples of, let's keep with gender roles in Judaism, rather than it being an issue of the dogma, rather than it being an issue of the tradition itself, there are texts in the Talmud, for example, that speak about how a woman can be called up in a synagogue and can lead a service, even that women can serve as roles in leadership. In the Talmud itself, 2,000 years ago, so it's not an issue of the religion or the dogma, it's an issue of the culture. And when we conflate the two, that's where these issues begin to arise. And that what defines, what's, inside Judaism and outside Judaism isn't necessarily the text itself, because if one looks carefully enough and looks deeply enough, you can find examples both in the Bible and in the oral tradition of the Mishnah Talmud to permit various different practices that we would regard as completely forbidden. Another really good example is meat and milk. In the Talmud, it's discussing how how once you've eaten meat, you need to wait a certain period of time before you can then have milk. And the accepted tradition that we have today, depending on whatever community you come from, it could be 6 hours or 3 hours or 1 hour. And generally that's like the spectrum within which we function within that. And if someone were to come and say to you, well, why can't I just, I value not mixing meat and milk. Why can't I wash my mouth out in between? An individual was someone who didn't necessarily know or study that aspect of Jewish law might say, well, that's completely utterly forbidden. It's outside the realm of Jewish law. But in fact, that's not true. We see an example in Tosafot, in the Gemara of Chulin, where a certain individual gives the opinion saying that actually there are certain people at that time who would wash their mouth out after eating meat and then go on and have milk. And so the example, meaning the traditions and the examples and the arguments exist. It's just that as a culture, as a society, we've kind of forgotten that memory. That's no longer part of our collective memory. And so for an individual to kind of say that you're either in or you're out, and define an incredibly narrow route to be in or out, is really disingenuous to what Judaism has been for 3,000 years. I don't know whether it's necessarily related, like the question you wrote on here, but that's like another great example of Ethiopian Jews. I mean, you could even go as far as say not only Ethiopian Jews, but Judaism has developed in so many different ways and fashions around the world, in so many different ways that we look that the traditions, customs, even languages have changed. Yes, we have common denominators that connect us all, right? That bind us, even for communities such as the Ethiopian Jewish community that was really cut off for thousands of years. Even the like ultra-Orthodox rabbinate recognizes Ethiopian Jews as real Jews. I mean, embarrassingly recently, but still they still recognize them as 100% authentic Jews, even though their practices are, not in every case, but in some cases differ to the traditional Ashkenazi interpretation of what is Jewish law.
Where does the certainty of Ashkenazi Jews come from, that they believe that they are the ones that understand this the bestest?
Ethnocentrism.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think Nate's that's. I mean, I think. Look, I tell you what. Okay, it's to do with. There's a couple of pieces, right? I mean, you could say it's just white privilege, right? But there's a piece there's a piece that because of there were after the like spread around the diaspora, two vibrant Jewish communities were able to exist pretty freely for many centuries, and because Ashkenazi Jewry, for example, was able to was able to grow significantly larger than their Sephardi cousins, even just by mere numbers alone. That could be one of the reasons. And again, it doesn't mean they're correct. It's just there was more of them. Also because of the state of Israel as well. When the state of Israel was created, there was a definite slant and favoritism shown towards Ashkenazi Jews, at least initially. And that definitely
weren't they also like the primary ones that came originally, and then the Sephardi were kind of pushed out from or the Mizrahi too, were kind of just, they showed up in Israel almost by force of the Arab nations kind of.
Exactly, and there's like, again, it's not really spoken about so much, but there's like writings of Ben Gurion, who even spoke about how, one of the missions of the new state of Israel was to Europify these Jews coming in from the Middle East and kind of bring this kind of culture to all Jews coming in. But even we see it in today, like a lot of the Mizrahi and also Ethiopian Olim that were coming in later were pushed into what's now known in Israel as the periphery. Usually like the coastal towns, southern towns of Israel. Number one, because they were generally hard, they were harsher environments. And the kind of Ashkenazi ruling class didn't necessarily care about them as much. And that then kind of manifested itself also with the way that Jewish law was perceived. The truth is, though, even today, like every Ashkenazi Jew kind of sees themselves on equal footing as like a religious Mizrahi Jew, but when your whole worldview, right, particularly with ultra-Orthodox Judaism, when your whole worldview is caught up with like one form of Judaism, and that's what you've been brought up on, and that's the history that you learn, when you are confronted with something that is so different, it can make it shakes the foundations of everything that you've been taught. So I think that's I think the source of where this comes from. But there are bridges being built. I think it was a big deal when the rabbinate accepted and recognized Ethiopian Jews as fully Jewish. Okay, wonderful. Is there any follow-up questions, comments, concerns? If I didn't maybe answer the question fully enough, if I missed anything out, any other examples, anything like that?
It's not entirely, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it addresses points or, things that both Vasily and Yoel brought up, asking about continuity versus change, static versus dynamic. There's the old adage, you put two Jews in the room and you'll have three opinions. But if we think about, of the patriarchs, we're not the nation of Abraham, we're the nation of Israel. And how did Israel get his name? He was Yaakov, and he stole from his brother, and he did wrong, and he ran away. And then when he comes back, and he's trying to make things right, he comes across a stranger in the path, and he wrestles for 3 days, can't overcome him, can't be overcome, and eventually the stranger pops his hip out, and it turns out, I don't remember if the stranger was God or an angel, or the stranger was some representative of the divine. And our people might be a light unto the nation, but we are not the ones with answers. We are simply the ones that struggle with the questions. And that's going to lead to change over time. We are not a static religion by any means. Looking at the different streams, ideological streams, the different communities, we are, our strength comes from our ability to adapt and change and wrestle with these questions. And so, both of the points that you, Vasily and Yoel, brought up, I think that's kind of like a necessity of the Jewish people, is the ability to evolve. That's the reason that we've, kept it kicking for a few thousand years. What other group of people could survive without a homeland, a unified language, a unified, and eventually come back and become a unified language? We carried our identity on our backs, and we're able to adapt it to the times, changing places, changing situations for thousands of years. So I think it's like a necessity that we do that.
Beautiful. I think there that you said, as you said, the name Yisrael, it means to wrestle with God and overcome. It's also then poignant, right, that the place where this is happening is in the country of Israel. That we, as a nation, as a community, we've got into bad habits. We've gone into bad habits by living in a diaspora, where we were the minority, where we felt like we had to move back into our shell in order to protect our faith, rather than, as you said, Nate, beautifully, the idea of carrying it on our backs and moving forward and continuing to push. I think then having now the modern state of Israel, a place where we can continue that wrestling and can continue that change for the better, is something which we as a society, we as a community can only ever be thankful for, and hopefully can continue to see the positive change that it brings, not only within ourselves, but within the community and the religion itself. Beautiful, beautiful, Nick. Thank you.
I don't think it's entirely a bad thing at the time in Galut though, because it definitely adds perspective. Definitely adds, like I grew up in a place where there's no Jewish community, and I dealt with a lot of terrible things, and I didn't understand why, because I had no community to explain this as part of a big history. And I went to Israel, and I'm teaching in a school, in an elementary school, and the full-blooded Jews, even it was a secular school, so not religious people, but the full-blooded Jews would make fun of the Russian Jews, make even worse fun of the Arab kids. And me, as somebody that grew up as Ager, as the stranger, I would not stand for that. Stop that down real quick. But I think it's our time abroad, in these kind of like little pockets is important to remember. It's crucial to remember.
100%. Yeah, I couldn't say better myself. You're right. I think it's added to our culture and character as a nation. One has to, one doesn't have to do anything, but one would want to believe that this is now the right time to kind of now make that next transition, to move from the diasporic nature of being the other and being the stranger to reclaiming a sense of pride and of pride into what it means to be the Jewish people. Beautiful. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all so very, very much. I'm always available. These questions and dialogues can continue anyway in the WhatsApp group that Tamar set up. If you're not part of the WhatsApp group, let me know and I'll add you. My number is in there too if you wish to be in touch. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It was really, really special. Thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.